very good morning to everyone who's joined us today. A warm welcome to any new participants for today's webinar titled Resilience in Action, as you can see from the title slide there. Look, I hope you're really well, and if I guess you're anything like me, you've just seen the news this morning, sitting in Victoria, where the Premier's come out and just given a little bit of insight to what term 2 and beyond is going to look like. So a few things sort of going around in my head at the moment around school, one for my kids and my family, but two for what it means for me. And when I say I hope you're well, I guess that really is an extension from that question. And I hope that your family are well during these really uncertain times, and also from a school front, I hope things are working out from you there. And I hope today we can give you a little bit of insight and help along the way with working through some of those challenges that we face in the classrooms. When we set out to plan this webinar and this suite of webinars, this was one topic that I was really excited about. It's one topic that I felt, gee, it's relevant given some of the challenges that we face today. And why I love it, I guess, is it takes me back to my time in the classroom. It takes me back to the time that I was doing the stuff that I loved at the coalface. And really, the schools that I generally worked with, there were schools that were often attracting kids from lower socioeconomic areas. And for me, some of those resilient traits that they would display were just, I guess, the inspiration that I needed to be able to support and to be able to build me up as a person that probably didn't quite understand some of the hardships that were facing some of our kids. And I guess that wasn't really until we started working through resilience that, from my point of view, I started to make a bit of sense about that important characteristic that we know we love in our schools. I guess when we talk about resilience, it takes time. It's not something that we can just deliver one day and that we are resilient ready the next. And I guess the other sort of thing that I love about is that strong correlation that there is between resilience and bullying. And obviously, kids that are a little bit more resilient are less likely to be affected by bullying, and that probably also then leads them to be less likely to be bullies. So a whole range of things for me that makes sense when we talk about resilience and the importance of those type of characteristics in the kids who we work with. I guess the second thing that I just want to touch on quickly before we move on to the main part of the webinar is just the control panel. So somewhere around your screen, if this is the first time that you've actually joined in on a webinar, I'm just going to talk you through, you'll see a little toolbar probably at the top of your screen. Now, I'm just going to ask if you can open the chat section of that. What we'll use there is the chat section will be to be able to communicate your questions, your thoughts, your feelings, anything that you want me to follow up on, just pop it in there. I just need to draw your attention to one part of it. Down the bottom there, it's got all panelists. I just need you to drop that box down, and it's to all panelists and all attendees would be the ideal. I see Katie checking in already. Great to see you, Katie. Thank you. The other thing too is that you'll see in that chat box throughout this morning, there'll be a number of posts that will be about upcoming webinars. So from both Adam and Amy there, just to keep you in the loop of what other opportunities will be happening. I see people, Annette, thank you. Phil, good on you, mate, there. Hi from Toorak Primary School. At the end of today, what I'll make sure I do is I'll send you the slide deck. Within probably about 48 hours, you'll get a PDF version of what this, I guess, overview of resilience in action will look like, and you'll be able to take that and use it with your staff. Just before we get into it, let's just check in and get this webinar underway. And I guess the two questions I'm going to be asking, and I want you just to put two numbers down. It's out of 10. 10 means that you're smashing it. 1 means that you're struggling a little bit. The first one is, how are you going? Out of 10, how are you feeling today? And the second part of that question will be, how's your school community going? So how do you feel your school is responding to this challenge that we're facing at the moment? Is there a link between how you're feeling and how your school's feeling? Are you miles apart? I'll just get you a chance just to pop a number or two into the chat box there, just while I get a bit of an overview of where, 8's nice, this is great. Philippa, good on you. You know what, this isn't a surprise for me. I reckon that we've gone through that period of real uncertainty, and we've got to the point now where we're going, actually, I'm sort of on track here. I'm feeling okay. I've got a bit of clarity. Like, obviously, we're waiting on external announcements and other things to come our way. I see, people are sort of pushing up above that 5, which is great. Andrew, a bit of shout out to Simon Harkness. Good to see Simon here. I'm going to reference my kids a couple of times. Simon's a teacher at my kids' school, so hopefully I don't sort of play on him too much today. All right, let's get into it. I guess I like to find a poster child, or I like to find the face of resilience. And when we talk about resilience, I'm looking for who's the guru in this area. I could have gone to so many of the different people who play such an important part in our lives. And some of them, if you punch it into Google, could have come up as the most resilient of all times. Examples could have been people like Albert Einstein, the fact that he didn't speak until the age of 4, that Jessica Watson was another one for me that sort of keeps coming up, her ability to be able to navigate around the world. Just an absolutely amazing feat. Muhammad Ali, Bill Gates, and the list sort of goes on. Colonel Sanders is another one that sort of pumps them on when I talk about resilience. And I guess if you're not sure of the Colonel's story, that he went to 1,009 restaurants to put his little pitch in there about KFC before he decided to, and there were 1,009 rejections before he actually, at the age of 65, decided to open KFC. So a pretty cool story there. But today I've decided to go for Mr. Bounce from the Mr. Men collection. The reason I've gone for Mr. Bounce as sort of the poster child of resilience is because, to sum it up, what we've got here is the ability to bounce back from adversity, overcome risk, and overcome difficulty. Now, for me, this is what it's all about. The key words that I'm sort of got in there blue, things like adversity, overcoming risk and or difficulty. And why I love it, because this is the reality of what we face on a daily basis. Nothing is perfect. What we find are these setbacks and these challenges. And these challenges don't just have to be in our professional lives. I think sometimes when we talk about resilience, what we talk about is what's going on at school. What we sometimes forget is what's the baggage that we're bringing to school that's actually happening in our personal lives. And I guess it's those challenges that are the reality that every single person who walks into a schoolyard would face in some way, shape or form. I guess the other good thing about when I talk about resilience, like if I was just to run an absolutely shocking webinar today, a really poor performance, plenty of mistakes, really boring, doesn't go anywhere, and I was to get that feedback, I could just put that down to being a learning experience. And I guess that's going to build my resilience. So in some ways, I'm justifying that if this doesn't hit the mark for you, I know that I'm going to be bouncing back on Friday of this week and I'll be running another one. So, it's about those traits and characteristics that we bring along the way. I guess I've also got to put into perspective at the current times, and on a really serious note, isn't resilience so important for us today? In today's challenges that we're facing, the uncertainty, we talk about, the health of friends and the health of family, the health of people within our community, that isolation and the mental health challenges that are going to go along with that. And as I mentioned earlier, I was only just sort of talking to my wife who's a teacher at a school, and the uncertainty about what term 2 brings for her and for her colleagues. So, it is something that is of real relevance to us today, but something that will also serve us better as we get down the track. On a bit more of a serious note around a figurehead or someone that I believe is sort of my resilience hero. I could have used Mr. Bounce, and as I have done, been able to justify why I think that's the case. But really today, and I'm a bit of a sport lover, I'm going to go to Michael Jordan. And I am a bit of a basketball fan. And, I guess the common stories we hear about Michael Jordan and the fact that resilience is such a key part of the work that he has been doing and why he was so successful, that, he's cut from his first high school team. I think most people have heard that story somewhere along the line, anyone who's been involved in any sporting circle. He's got another famous quote there that sort of sits with, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. But for me, it's that quote that's on the screen now that I just love about his understanding of facing adversity. And the reason why I love it, you just unpack that a little bit, he's missed more than 9,000 shots. 26 times trusted to win the game. And you think about that, and I could just imagine, Phil Jackson, coach of the Bulls, called a timeout. We've got playoffs just around the corner against someone like the Utah Jazz. And they've said, right, the play is that we're going to go to Jordan here. Now, if Michael Jordan was to sit back and analyse all of the negatives and to say, well, hang on a second, 26 times I've been trusted to win the game and I've missed, I'm not taking that shot. I reckon the rest of his teammates would look around going, well, who is going to take that shot? But the reason he's succeeded is because he's taken those challenges on board, irrelevant of the outcome, unattached to that outcome at that time, and said, I'm going to absolutely put myself in this position. I remember once I tried to use this little quote in a meeting with a number of my school leaders. To be fair, it was far from successful. I didn't come even close to pulling it off. But really what happened is I tried to put myself in the situation of Michael Jordan. I think I used some stories along the lines of the fact that, I reckon I've poorly explained concepts or ideas over 9,000 times in my career as a teacher. And I've run 300 plus disaster lessons in the classroom. And over 26 times, I've missed out on positions of responsibility or job promotions, or it might even be things like funding applications. And for me, it's about those learning opportunities that I believe that it allowed me to be successful. Now, I got a bit of a vague look from a number of the kids and a number of the leaders that were in the room with me, but I guess the concept opened up the fact that we do face these challenges on a fairly regular basis. I guess the other sort of key thing about when I talk through resilience and I lead resilience workshops in a school, and I'm, chewing the fat with educators about how this actually looks and what it feels like. It does change depending on how full your bucket is. And at any given time when our buckets are really full, maybe we are a little bit less resilient than the fact that, if we're that opposite end of the spectrum. I guess the other key question that sort of comes my way is that I use that word explicitly quite deliberately here to say, can we teach resilience? Is it something we can formally be able to equip our students with? And I guess the answer is yes. And I've already given a couple of examples today of my resilient heroes. And I've deliberately done that because I think it's a strategy that we can take and place over the top of some of the work and some of the learning that happens in our classroom. Getting kids to be able to investigate, to be able to understand figureheads within either the area of interest for them. It might be music, the arts, sport. It might be something completely different. But what are the characteristics or the traits that they bring that unpacks for us that notion of resilience? I guess on that really informal level, if I was to say, people who have done a bit of work with me, they know I love a continuum, that we can create that opportunity for learning to take place at the informal end and try and get that nice balance between success and also failure. And maybe when I talk about informal, maybe I probably should replace that with the word indirect. I think that's probably more appropriate. And, I talk about that picture there and it's not a photo, but gee, I remember the times that I've been able to have the opportunity to teach my kids to ride their bike and the number of failures. And I guess, I'm lucky enough to have 4 kids. And number one, I remember wrapping her in cotton wool and, every time she'd go to fall, I'd be there to catch. And I think it took her a little bit longer to learn that concept or skill of riding the bike. But when I get to number 4, I was rarely within range of being able to catch my child. And I think for me, that was my leadership there, understanding how to best build the capacity of my kids. So it is about resisting the urge, and that's that really informal end. If we were to say, what is it that resilience looks like? Because we talk about it a fair bit in schools. How do you know if a kid's resilient? I think these 5 dot points sum it up pretty well. As you can see there, that first one, the really important words that sit in that first one are that appropriate mix. And it is an appropriate mix of pride and determination. Can you have too much pride? Absolutely you can. And I think we've all seen, or we've gotten these kids that sit somewhere around our school at some stage that, they just sort of verge on that they border on arrogance. And you go, well, hang on a second. It's good that you're proud of yourself and it's good that you're proud of your achievements, but are they really in perspective? Being able to make sure that that's balanced against determination. And really that's that key word that I think we want in there is determination. The second sort of dot point extends from that never give up attitude that we sort of spoke about a little bit earlier, the bouncing back. And I know that as a teacher, and these are the sort of kids that I loved having in my class. They were the kids that no matter what happened, they would never give up. And I had this young lad that I used to work with, and look, he had some serious challenges outside of school, but when he turned up for school, he'd have that never give up attitude. And as he sort of progressed through the years, he got to year 12 and he actually started applying for some leadership positions. Now, he was quite challenged, 1, academically, but 2, socially. And despite that, he'd come in, he'd get some coaching, he'd get some support from me, and he put together an amazing school captain application. Now, unfortunately, he missed out. And not long after that announcement, he come back into my office and he knocked on my office door and he said, "Mr. Gill, I want to talk to you again." I said, "Yeah," and I thought I was going to have to pick up the pieces. And his attitude was like, "Right, I need some help. I'm going to go for the next leadership position and the next leadership position." He missed out on about 3 leadership positions before he nailed one. And it was that persistence, that never give up attitude that I just loved in him. And he's gone on to do some amazing things in our community now. Third one, temporary nature of most struggles. Our kids can understand that. They understand that most problems will be past. And it's a fine line between saying, "Oh, I don't care," and "It's okay, I'll be able to get over this." Fourth one is that perseverance, to be able to get back up when they get knocked over. And then the 5th one is around extensive supports. And we're going to pick up on the extensive support stuff a little bit later on through this webinar. So if I was to go, right, well, what are the key traits of a kid that's got resilience, that demonstrates high levels of resilience? I've sort of nailed it into 5, what I think are sort of the 5 key traits. Now, I guess it's really important here that, one, we know what these traits are. That's the first thing. But the second thing is the ability to be able to practice them is the challenge. So it's okay to know what these things are, but how do we actually practice them? We'll get into that as this webinar sort of unfolds throughout this morning. The first one is determination or grit. When I'm talking about determination or grit, what I'm talking about is that ability to be able to consistently apply yourself over a period of time. It's not just have a go at one thing and then say, all right, I'm done. It didn't work, or it did work. See you later. It's about understanding that when everything's lost, I've still got a little bit of hope and I'm going to go again. And it's about perseverance. So we know that one of the highest success indicators in schools is a level of persistence that the young person brings into the classroom. Again, I'm sort of going to reference some of my kids. You know, my youngest child at times he frustrates me a little bit, because I'd often say, you know, he'd want to do things his own way. I'd want to make sure that he's doing things. And I often go, oh, gee, he's stubborn. But really, if I want to think about that, all he is very determined. He sees his older brother and sisters doing things their way. He wants to fall in line with that. So it's that fine line between saying, oh, gee, he's very stubborn, and saying, just so determined, wants to do things the other way. Second one, mindfulness. Taking the time to focus on the present. And it's really about not worrying around the future. And I think for me, mindfulness at the moment, and I've talked about this in previous webinars, but it's so important at this particular point in time, being conscious or aware of what's actually happening around us. Again, I go back to my time early in my principalship days, and I actually sort of nearly thought, and I talk about arrogance a little bit earlier, but I nearly thought I had this level of superpower, that I was invincible. And I thought that the harder I could work, the more I could do, the better off I'd be. But it wasn't really until I started taking mindfulness for granted and understanding what it was that I actually started to improve my own well-being, my own health, and my own performance. And really, it's around strategies like meditation, being able to create opportunities for you just to focus on the present and not worry too far forward about, well, what are the challenges that are on the horizon there. I guess the other thing too about mindfulness, and I gave this example, I'm going to give it again today, because I did get a couple of follow-up emails from last week. People sort of said to me, hey, can you talk me through this a little bit more? And it was that strategy of box breathing. And it came from a book that I read around a US Navy SEAL. And he used this box breathing technique to be able to center himself, or be able to sort of balance himself before a challenge was on the horizon. And it's simple as 4 breaths in, followed by holding your breath for 4, followed by, breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. And if you can complete that 4 times, it's just that little strategy to be able to help you in times of challenge. All right, third one, gratitude. And what we're talking about when we talk about gratitude is really, it's understanding and appreciating what we have, not what we want. So appreciating the moment, being thankful for that. This picture here for me tells the stories, and really I could have sat this picture as the overline picture for the 5 traits that I'm talking about. But what we're on about when we talk about this picture here is this opportunity that presented with me probably about 8 years ago. And I had the opportunity to take a group of students overseas to Malaysia, and we spent a couple of days in an orphanage. And they were a group of Year 9 students. And when we were at that orphanage, they basically were given the opportunity to either just sit back and watch, or to be able to get involved. Now, as you can imagine, a group of Year 9 students, initially, they chose that path of, I'm just going to sit back and watch and take this all in. They probably didn't interact or connect. But as we started to get into the program, as we started to spend more time there, what started to happen is they started to appreciate the things that we had back at home. They started to appreciate the things they'd often say, oh, that's crap, or that's not worth it, or we've got a crappy school, whatever else. And really, it was an opportunity for our students to, 1, connect, but 2, what came out of it was they were so grateful for the things that we had that we'd just taken for granted. So gratitude for me, it's the big 3. I practice gratitude on a daily basis. I sort of an evening, I just reflect on what are the 3 things that I'm grateful for today. And I try and get a bit of variety in those 3 things. So I don't just go at the same thing. Oh, I'm grateful that I've got an awesome job. I'm grateful that I've got a beautiful family, and I'm grateful that I've got good health. I actually try and drill down and go, right, what are 3 things today that I've been really grateful for? And not use something that I've used over the last 3 days. And again, there's evidence and research to show that can certainly help us. 4th area, or the 4th key trait is resilience. Empathy. Resilience. Empathy. When I talk about empathy, what I'm talking about there is care and understanding. Talking about the words such as I'm hearing you and what you are saying is the ability to be able to understand what others are going through, to see it from their perspective, to use the metaphor, to walk in their shoes. What we know is that empathy is a key trait of resilient kids, that they show care and understanding towards others. And we've touched on empathy on a number of our webinars. And again, it's certainly something that we'll pick up on a little bit later on. And you can now see why I could have used that photo of the students as an overlap between a number of these traits. And the fourth key trait is optimism. Staying optimistic or staying positive really is what I'm on about here. It's around when times are challenging or difficulty, can we see the positives through that? And it's important there because what it helps us do is it helps us maintain hope. So positive thinking, I think this is really important for me. Positive thinking is a mindset. And positive thinking doesn't mean that we're ignoring the problem, that we're forgetting that there are problems there. What it actually means is that we're understanding and contextualizing those problems so that we can then come up with a plan to overcome them. And what's really important when we're talking about optimism are things like language. I will, I can. And when we talk about language, it's that really key starting point that I think we sometimes underestimate the power of language. And I know from a number of other webinars that we've run there, we've sort of touched on language in different ways, shapes and forms. And again, I'm going to sort of do that today when we really get into it. So how do we build resilience in our students? I've touched on the key aspects or the key parts of what we're looking for, those key traits. But the really big question, why you've come along to this webinar today, is I'm sure that what you want is a number of ways to be able to bring out those strongest characteristics in our students. And I'm going to use that word build as being the sort of centerpiece for this, because it's not something that we can just deliver and then walk away from. It's not something that we can give to our kids. We actually have to build it by making ongoing regular deposits into their bank. And the way that we do it, we're going to get into. But the reason why I want to sort of unpack this is it's based on a psychological theory that we're actually, as humans, hardwired on what's called a negative bias. Now, the notion of negative bias is where negative events or negative thoughts have a greater impact on our brain than positive thoughts. And this isn't something that we choose to do. This is the way that we're hardwired. So what we do is we quite often remember traumatic events more frequently than we do positive achievements. And I'm sure that as I'm talking through this, you're sort of sitting back there going, yeah, you know what, that's probably, I remember times that I've done some pretty good stuff, but also times that I've faced a bit of trauma, and the trauma's the stuff that sticks out. And again, I come back and I'll give this example soon, but we remember insults better than we remember praise. And what happens is with this negative bias, the brain makes us feel that negative events are more significant. Now, I remember I guess, again, I can give 2 examples. The first one is some of the work that I started doing that was new work when I come to real schools was around writing articles. And what would happen is those articles would go out for, obviously, the general public to be able to read. And quite often you get lots of really nice, great comments, people saying, well done, thanks, good article, I love this, whatever else it may be. But then every now and again you get someone who disagrees with you. They don't like what you're writing about. And they'll actually say that, that's beautiful. I'd love to hear some feedback. I'm someone that really enjoys feedback. But sometimes what would happen is mixed in amongst the 15 to 17 really positive comments, I might get one negative comment. And initially I was holding on to those negative comments thinking, gee, I can't believe this or I can't believe that. And again, I go back to my time when I was in the school, and if I'd have a run-in with a student or with a parent, that would quite often be the thing that I'd hold on to. Not the 30 to 40 to 50 positive interactions that I've had. The reason why, it's because we're hardwired on that psychological theory of negative bias. So if we're serious about what works, I reckon it's always easier to start with what doesn't work. What are the things that if we were to do this, we're going to find that this isn't going to work. And when I talk about what doesn't work, I'm going to focus back to that negative bias and talk about negative language. And again, I touched on language earlier. I think in schools we come up with, I guess, and it probably goes outside of schools, we sometimes use these theories that it's going to make people stronger. And what we're on about is building up their self-esteem, building them up as a young person. But when we use that negative talk, and I'm going to take the example of negative self-talk as a starting point, we beat ourselves up. We beat others up when we talk about things, and we actually use negative language to explain a situation that's happened. Again, another sort of part of that is what we call negative priming language, where priming language is where we use language to influence an outcome or a behaviour that we want to see. So the words that we use will ultimately affect the outcomes that we want to see. And again, the perfect example of some of that negative language is probably when we all went to school as adults and our teachers yelling at us, that they sort of come up with this theory, the harder or the louder that they would yell, the more likely we were to respond. And we see that again in, I talked about my love for sport. We see that in some of those old football movies and some of those old sporting movies where we've got the coach giving the players the spray to be able to get them up and going. What we know is that that doesn't work. When I come to schools, the common thing that I hear regarding resilience are things like, I need you to be more resilient. I need you to build your resilience. You know, they're comments that we quite often use when a student faces a little bit of adversity. And I've used it. I've used it with my kids. You need to be more resilient and work through that. And that's not a strategy that's actually going to work. I guess the other comment that we sometimes hear is that we go, right, how can I be a little bit more strategic about this? And we use a comment like, I don't want you to worry about failing or not completing the task. Now, again, I'm going to sort of link this back to a psychological theory called suppression, where we try to suppress our thoughts. And really, suppression's the act of stopping yourself from thinking something or feeling something. So by using this technique, I'm going to say that, again, it's quite ineffective. And I think, you know, from my point of view, I need to demonstrate this. I absolutely love social experiments. So I'm going to do a little social experiment with you right now. And it's just going to require you to sit and think for a couple of minutes. And then what I'm going to get you to do is to post a word into the chat box. So hopefully everyone's ready. Here we go. So this is based on that psychological theory of suppression. What I want you to do is take the next minute to think about anything you want. You can think about something super, super positive. You can think about the greatest holiday that you went to, or you can think about something that's really challenging you at the moment. It might be something around COVID. It might be something around employment. Whatever it is, I just need you to think about that. The only thing that you are not allowed to think about is an elephant. Now, I'm going to give you 15 seconds in silence to keep thinking and think about that great thing, but you are not allowed to think about an elephant. And while you're not thinking about an elephant, I just want you to look at the screen. I'll just give you 15 seconds. I'll have a drink. All right, and I'm going to stop you there. So what I want you to do is just in the chat box, if you're able to think about everything that you wanted to think about, place a yes in there. If you thought about an elephant, I want you to place a no. If you thought about the elephant, no. Okay, good. And what I'm seeing is a whole string of no's. Kate, well done. Was able to think about everything except an elephant. Or love that. So what's actually happened there is I've used negative priming. So I've asked you to do something and then I've primed you by using examples and I've primed you by using language to be able to avoid you doing something. So what happens is that when we say words like, I don't want you to worry about failing and I don't want you to worry about not completing the task, what starts to happen is we pick up on the words failing and completing tasks. So that's the stuff that doesn't work. All right, let's get straight into the things that do work. I've got a list here that I'm going to sort of punch through in terms of the 7. And I come up with that word 7 because for me, I reckon that's achievable. I reckon it's something that we can sort of go, right, what are the things that sit on that continuum from informal right through to formal? And the first thing that is sort of more to it formal, that direct way, is explicitly teaching programs, games, and team builders. So allowing students, as you can see there, to connect through programs that strengthen relationships. What I'm saying here is that it's okay on a Friday morning to be able to, in your pastoral care or that sort of equivalent time spot that we have around building some of those social skills, to be able to explicitly teach a program. And to be able to do that under some of those great things that are there. You know, we've seen some of the work that's come through our schools, and it's around the Mind Matters stuff, the POS Ed stuff, whatever else it may be that your school's holding on to. But what's really important is not the program, it's actually the relationship. And when I talk about relationship, there's a couple of really key parts within that relationship. The first one is around teacher-student, and the second one is around student-student. Now, when I'm talking about the relationship with teacher and student, what I'm talking about is when we explicitly teach these programs, providing a really sound relationship will allow us to provide high accountability and high support. Now, when we provide high accountability and high support, what we can actually do is leverage that relationship for learning to take place and push our kids to the limits. So what we want to be able to do is find the edge, and we want to be able to create an opportunity to push those kids that we know so well to what the edge looks like. And the edge changes for every single student. This is the importance of that relationship, knowing where the boundaries are and how much room you've got to move with every individual student, but be able to provide in a safe way that's going to challenge them then. So the thing about the student-student relationship, when we talk about the importance of that, is around how do we provide an environment of collaboration in our classrooms, not competition. What we don't want to do is provide an opportunity for students to be able to get the upper hand over their peers. In my view, the space that is appropriate for is the sporting field, or is the opportunities that we present outside of school in structured activities. Inside of school, what we want to be able to do is to be able to provide collaboration, where kids are actually working together to be able to support each other. And when we do have one kid drop off, for their peer to be able to help them build back, again, that's a skill in itself. And what we're talking about here is around what's the culture of our classrooms actually looking like? How can we explicitly teach those programs? Because what we know is that anyone can deliver a program, but the effectiveness of that is going to vary significantly from classroom to classroom. So we can actually do it at that more direct end. The second thing when it comes to how do we bring out the strongest characteristics or traits in students, number two is setting the course. When we talk about challenges that our kids face in the classrooms, anxiety is certainly something that sort of pops up as being a real challenge that I talk to educators about, and they say, you know, just the number of kids that are showing higher levels of anxiety than that previously have been. And there's a whole range of reasons behind that. But a lot of anxiety is linked back to the absence of a plan. So the uncertainty around where we're actually going. Now, most teachers have a plan. What I'm going to say is that what we don't sometimes do well is share that plan with our students. Now, I'm going to say it's not a secret, get it out there. I don't think I've met too many teachers that have walked into school and said, what day is it? You know what? I'm going to say, with the exception of at the moment, I understand that right now we are getting a little bit mixed up with what our days are, and that's certainly something that I'm facing at home. But generally speaking, most teachers walk in to school with a pretty clear plan of what the future actually holds, or what they're intending to be able to do. And what I'm going to say is that if we can set that course with our students, if we can set that plan out with them, what we have is the ability to be able to get them to change their narrative, to be able to change the story and go, well, what's the new story that we're on about here? When we talk about set the course, what we're talking about is moving forward. And I used to quite often use this comment with the students that I'd work with, and I'd say, what you need to do is cleanse the wound. You need to be able to get out of the past. What you need to be able to do is, if you faced a bit of a challenge, you need to be able to cleanse that wound so it's not going to get infected. Because what happens is that our kids love anchoring in the past. So part of our job in terms of building resilience in our young people is being able to move them into the present, and then the most important part is into the future. Now, for any of our partner school staff members who I know are on board here today, it fits in with the restorative practice work that we do within our schools. And it's about going from the past to the present and into the future. So setting the course, helps our students understand what's ahead. Number 3. I'm just going to sort of draw your attention there to the chat box. You'll see Adam's just posted there. If anyone else has got anything they'd like to question or raise or comment, then pop that in there. But you will see Adam and Amy continually posting throughout the course of this webinar. Number 3 is model resilient behaviours. Now, I've talked a lot about modelling in previous webinars because I actually believe that it's the easiest and most effective way of teaching, and that's by modelling. And why I say it's the easiest is because in some ways it takes the least amount of preparation and can have the biggest influence. But what you've got to be aware of is that when we talk about modelling, that can be both positive and negative. So if you're the sort of teacher that, if we have a briefing before school starts and there's maybe some news that's presented in the briefing that you don't sort of respond well to, can you leave that there in that moment? And can you actually go to your class and not let that type of news worry you? I'm just having a couple of teachers that I know, for me, this used to be a little bit of a risk, that if we were delivering some news that was a little bit challenging or quite negative to start off a day, that I thought that's actually going to flow into their classroom. Now, part of that modelling is being able to show kids that we can bounce back from challenges. So when things don't go to plan, how do we actually respond? And I think the best example of this is a teacher and a great friend of mine. Unfortunately was diagnosed with a really serious health condition. And in a small community, that spread quite quickly across the community. And people are like, oh, the greatest teacher, not going to be able to come back. This is so, so devastating. And that particular teacher come into school, in a really sort of, modified capacity, but a few days after being diagnosed. And what happened is the message that sent to the students around bouncing back and the way that they talked about how they were dealing with those challenges was the modelling that, for me, is not able to be taught formally. So it's about what we're doing as adults and the way that we are behaving. And I think, that little caption there, keep calm, pretend it's on the lesson plan. Isn't that so true? The number of things that go a certain way, we go, no, it's all right, I planned for that to happen. All right, number 4. Number 4 is around celebrating mistakes in high pursuits. And I've talked about the pictures of resilience, and this man right here is another absolute ripper. And for anyone that remembers, it's Eric Muzambini, I think he was the pronunciation there, Eric the Eel, from the Sydney 2000 Olympics. And I think from memory, it was the 100-metre freestyle where he dived in and obviously after diving in, it was fairly clear that he was really, his swimming capacity was quite low. But for Eric, it was around the learning opportunity. It was around aiming high and falling short. And what we didn't celebrate enough, I guess, coming out of that was I think we probably did in the end, but at the time, it was that personal achievement. I remember watching and I'm thinking, what's going on here? It's the Olympics. But when you actually scale it back, it was about an individual effort there and being viewed as that learning opportunity. When we talk about resilience, generally we can categorise resilience into 3 areas. 3 levels is probably the best way to sum that up. The first one is low-level resilience. Now, when we talk about low-level resilience, what we're talking about is those kids that say, oh, everything's crap. It's not going to work. I'm not doing that. Not putting themselves in a situation where there's any challenge. And then quite often we do something where, we're in the classroom and with those kids with low-level resilience, they're not willing to participate, and they go out to the yard and they're able to participate against the kids that are 2 or 3 years younger than them because they know that their chances of success are going to be greater. So those low-level resilient kids, they're the sort of kids too that we often see that are facing some challenges around school attendance because it's just too hard. The second level is a mid-level resilience. Now, when we talk about mid-level resilience, what we're sort of talking about is that when on occasions kids are capable of showing that they are resilient. And generally when they show they're resilient, there are times when they're comfortable. So it might be in the art room. They're great participants. They do all these amazing pictures. They push themselves in specialist classes, like might be music or whatever else. And that's because it's an environment they're comfortable in. But when they come back to the classroom, they're not willing to extend themselves in our numeracy block. And again, that probably sums up that mid-level resilience. They're willing to take the challenge in an area that they like or feel comfortable with. But the ultimate and what we're aiming for here is what we call high-level resilience. And high-level resilience is where our young people are displaying high levels of resilience across their entire life, both inside and outside of the schools. And they're our resilient heroes. They're the kids that have an absolute go at everything that they've got coming their way. All right, so number 5 is around relationships and support. So when I'm talking about relationships and support, what I'm talking about is students being able to identify others that they can talk to. Now, that key word again for me sits with relationships. And again, I think the importance of relationships can never be underestimated. But what we often have is in kids that have medium or low level resilience, what they often do is they've got one support person. They've got a go-to that they trust and that they love. And when they're facing a bit of adversity, they find that person so that they can bounce back. But this is a great activity to run in particular with primary kids and then some lower secondary, where we say, right, put your hand up. And what I need you to do is to find one person from each of the 5 categories that you can go to for support when things get a little bit difficult. And what I'm talking about here is being able to diversify their support network. So it's okay that they've got one friend. It's okay that they've got one family member, but have they got someone at school? Have they got someone in their sporting club? Or have they got someone in their arts group or their youth group, whatever else it may be? And this is super important for right now at this particular point in time, in the absence of that face-to-face relationship that we've got with our kids. If we had an example of our really high resilient kids talking to us on a regular daily basis, what we'll find is that they're actually having conversations with family on a level that they probably previously haven't had. And that's certainly happening in my house. And I know that there is a key support for our kids, but that's not for every single student. So being able to get them to identify who are the 5, what's the group look like? And you're not allowed to go to the same group twice. So you can't have 3 people from school. Again, the really obvious thing that pops up for me when I talk about this is we had a kid at the school that I used to work with and had a great relationship with the wellbeing coordinator. And the wellbeing coordinator was his go-to. But what actually happened is that for a whole range of different reasons, that wellbeing officer moved to a different campus. That person wasn't available. So then the way that the student responded to someone else wasn't as positive as what they had been previously doing. And that's because their relationship or their support was so narrow. So it's important that we diversify and broaden. All right, number 6. Number 6 talks about building a scaffold and gamifying the experience. I don't think I've ever met a child who has been playing a game like Call of Duty or Fortnite and they said, I'm not motivated to go to the next level. The reason why is that computer games are designed in a certain way. Previously, if we go back as adults, we go back to the times, and again, I'm going to make some assumptions here, that if you're a similar age or thereabouts to me, that you remember games like Space Invaders and Pong and a whole range of other things like that. Now, what happened is if we failed at one of those games, that we'd have to go back to the very start. We might get to level 6, we'd have a fail, we'd have an opportunity that didn't quite fall our way, and then we'd go back to the very beginning. And what happened is we were more likely to give up easy. Now, things have progressed in the gaming world, and it's based on this scaffolding approach and this gamifying. That now what happens is you only go back to the start of the next level. So if you've got yourself to level 7, there's enough challenge for you to be able to progress to level 8. You're able to get there. But if you don't, you go back to the start of 7. Now, the reason why that happens is so that we don't lose interest. There's actually a scaffold there to support us. The other thing is that there are these little incentives along the way that provides success and engagement. Things like points or tools or whatever other game, new weapons, whatever else you find. The third thing that starts to happen now, and again, there's some stuff to take out of this. I'm not advocating for gaming time because I'm not a massive fan of gaming, but it's the philosophy and the theories behind it that I don't mind, is that it provides social interaction. So we can actually compete with or against other people in an online world. So it actually provides us the opportunity to collaborate when we're working with. So game designers now have been able to build an experience that's going to be positive, that's going to allow for success and allow for engagement. The question is, can we do that in our classroom so that we can provide opportunities for our students to be able to interact in a way that they're feeling successful and bounce back? And that balance is important. Success needs to be within reach. So can I get there, but is there enough challenge so that, one, if I fail, I'm not going back too far, but two, I'm eventually going to get there by a bit of perseverance. The important thing here is that, as we know, success is contagious, but we don't want to make it too contagious. We don't want to make it that it happens every single time, but we love that hit of feeling good and being able to achieve something. And number 7 sits with perspective. Sometimes you just need to step back and take a bit of a look and help your students in a certain way. When a student has a meltdown, e.g., could be anything. They've lost their piece of work. NAT plan results have come back and the NAT plan results weren't what they wanted. On-demand testing didn't get the results that they wanted. ATAR ranking wasn't what they want. What actually happens is straight away they get a little bit limbic or emotional. They're a part of their brain that triggers the emotions actually takes over from the clear thinking, which is the neocortex. I guess the best thing for me, the best example I had was to talk about perspective. I was at a PL session one day, and the person who was running the PL, they said to me, all right, what we need to do is to put things into perspective. We need to think about what's the very worst thing that's happening to you, or what's the worst thing that could happen to you, or what's the worst thing that has happened to you. And it might be something like the death of a family member, something really extreme. Then what we need to do is we need to come back from that and go, right, let's just talk about a relationship breakdown. Let's talk about what's actually happened in a part of your life where it hasn't resulted in death, but something severe has had an impact on you. And for me, I was talking about some of the examples of some of the students who have been going through situations where their parents have had family breakdowns. Now, in some cases, this is where it affects everyone in a different way. In some cases, it can be a really, a relieving thing because it stops the arguments that are happening at home. But for other kids, it can be quite a hit. They can take a real knock from that. So when we put that onto a continuum, we're sort of stepping back to about the midpoint saying this is serious. It's so relevant to now. If we talk about COVID, we talk about the impact that's happening on us. Again, everyone's got a different perspective on this. So we have to help our kids understand this in a different way. But then if I was to go, right, what was the thing that was really hurting you? What was the thing that was really affecting you? And it might be something like the ATAR result. And this is the perfect example. It might be the NAT plan results. Now, where does that sit on the continuum? It puts it into perspective that when we are looking outside of our little day, of our little moment, of our situation that we're finding is really challenging, and we're comparing it to other key things that may have happened or could happen in our life, it helps our kids put it into perspective. So again, it's a strategy that I'd encourage you to use within your classroom around just putting it out there around what's the thing that's really knocking you down that you want to bounce back from? And where does this sit in relation to other situations that have either 1 occurred, 2 are occurring, or 3 could occur within your life? And I think it just helps kids be able to put that into perspective, because they lose perspective sometimes. And I get that, especially our most driven and dedicated kids who want the very best. Sometimes they forget what's going on around them. All right. Just last slide there is probably the resilient hero. I'm going to come back to that because I love this resilient hero thing. A few years ago, study was undertaken, and it was by the New York Times, and really they were looking for the most resilient fictional character. Now, it was in American history. They come up with a whole range of different books and TV shows, cartoon characters, all that sort of stuff, and this is what they come up with, and I'm going to talk this through a little bit in a second. I'm just going to give you a minute to be able to watch this. Okay, so as you would have seen there, a couple of quick minutes. The winner of the most resilient fictional character, or the most recognised resilient character, was the Coyote. And for anyone that's seen, and I'm sure you've seen, the endless number of times where the Coyote has chased after and unsuccessfully been able to catch the Roadrunner, what actually happened is that when this was identified, Warner Brothers put out this little caption there, or this little 2-minute video that showed the Coyote catching what he had been chasing for so many years. Now, the reason why, and I think this is the important part, the reason why he was identified as the most resilient was because of two things. Number one is that he never gave up. No matter what happened, he would never give up. And the second thing is that he never attacked the problem in the same way twice. So he'd always come up with a new way of trying to catch the Roadrunner. And those two things alone stand for resilience when we talk about, how's this actually having an impact on the conversations that we could have within our kid. You should be able to find that somewhere online if you want to share it with your kids. It's an awesome way of being able to frame resilience, to talk about this in the classroom, except I guess things have changed, and I don't know what percentage of our kids would now know the Roadrunner, so that's probably a lesson in itself. All right, just a couple of opportunities that are coming up. This Thursday night, we have trivia night for TRAP teachers. We know that you love your trivia nights as teachers. We go to dinner parties and we're always asked the question, you're a teacher, you know the answer to that. Well, put that to practice. Let's get us to a point where we're having a fun night together in isolation. So if you're keen, somewhere around this, our website, and somewhere around this PDF, you'll be able to get access to the TRAP Teachers Trivia Night. Next one on Wednesday, which is tomorrow, Amy will be back for the I'm So Behind, Managing Expectations webinar that I know will be great. And I think it's so relevant for today and where we're at, and the potential of heading back into the classroom. So if you're keen, jump on board there and join Amy tomorrow, 10 a.m. I think in total, we've probably got about another 8 webinars over the course of the next week. So there'll certainly be something for everyone. And if you're not in there, what you need to do is just to make sure that you at least register, so then you get a chance to have a look at the work a little bit later on. And I'm just going to, before I close off the webinar, there's my contact details for anyone that wants to reach out, talk about this in any more detail. I'm happy to do that. I am just going to do one quick check of the webinar chat, and before I log you out, I want to say thank you. Annette, thank you. Really appreciate that. That's great. Perfect. Good on you, Simon. Thank you. Nothing more that I need to respond to. Have a great day, and look forward to joining you again, hopefully later in the week. If not, I'll be in the background tomorrow and be able to see some of the stuff that you're doing there. So enjoy the rest of your day and make it an absolute winner. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.